everyone. You're listening to the Sinister Spotlight podcast, as seen now on the Grim Reader blog. For today's episode, Eric and myself, Eric being the co-host, he in the lovely Vanna white dress to my right here, we will be taking in our very first double feature episode today. Pretty self-explanatory. Ooh, was that you coming out of your Vanna white dress?
Yep.
Awesome. Off to a good start. I like where we're going with this. But pretty self-explanatory. It's our first double feature episode. The idea behind the double features is that Eric and I take in two films that are related in theme or creative forces behind them, whether they be actors, writers, directors, or what have you, with each film having somewhat of a personal interest that both Eric and I have in them. So for today's episode, we are dealing with two films from Universal Studios from the 30s. The first one being The Black Cat from 1934, and the other, its companion piece, The Raven from 1935, both, of course, starring Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. And Eric and I have some pretty clear ideas about which of the two is the better one, don't we, Eric?
We do. Separate but equal ideas.
Yes, which means that they are totally equal. But mine are better. At any rate.
Much like the Jim Crowlows of old.
Yes.
Damn it, I fucked that up. You got me messed up.
And I'm going to keep that one in the podcast.
He's been messing up this whole time, but just deleting it through editing.
No, don't believe him. It's all a lie. I'm perfect. Everything I say comes out perfect. But to start off, the first film we're going to be discussing tonight is The Black Cat from 1934.
Come, Vetus. Are we men or are we children? Of what use are all these melodramatic gestures? You say your soul was killed, and that you have been dead all these years. And what of me? Did we not both die here in Marmaris 15 years ago? Are we any the less victims of the war than those whose bodies were torn asunder? Are we not both the living dead? And now you come to me, playing at being an avenging angel, childishly thirsting for my blood. We understand each other too well. We know too much of life. We shall play a little game, Venus. A game of death, if you like. But under any circumstances, we shall have to wait until these people are gone, until we are alone. Until tomorrow.
So to start us off, I guess it's reasonable enough to begin by asking, what was your first experience with The Black Cat like? You know, how did that occasion come up for you, if you can remember?
Well, I put the DVD in my DVD player and I watched it.
I would say that's a pretty succinct and good way to start, yes. So
I think it's one of those movies that you kind of hear about. It's not really considered one of the classics along the lines of, say, The Wolfman or Wolfman on the Brain, because you made me watch your video, or Frankenstein, but it's one of those kind of second-tier classics. I would say it's probably the most popular of that next level of all the Universal movies, so you kind of hear the name floating around. And of all the collaborations that Karloff and Lugosi did, which actually, I meant to look that up on IMDb, because they collaborated on several movies, but that would probably be the most famous of all of them.
Yeah, I think so. That's usually what you hear, as quoted in books and, what have you, that The Black Cat was their most famous pairing. And just to touch back on as far as experiences goes, it's funny that you say that well you heard about it, and so of course you sought it out and watched it on DVD. I actually kind of had, I don't know if you call it the reverse experience, but basically I saw it when I was fairly young. So if anything, I really hadn't heard much about the Black Cat, and I really had no idea of what it was or anything like that going into it. So it was kind of a different experience for me, really having no real inkling of where I was going with the movie, as opposed to you hearing these whispered rumors about the film.
I think they reference it in Ed Wood, actually.
Oh, do they?
I think that's the movie that sets off Lugosi on his first Karloff tirade, because the guy, the PA or whatever, coming up to him says, "I loved you in The Black Cat. You were great as Karloff's sidekick."
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Sidekick.
Yeah.
Fuck you!
That's right. It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
We're going to trot out our various impressions in this episode, I think.
Oh, yeah, and it's
and neither of them are any good.
Yeah, it's not going to be pretty. I mean, I'll try, but that's as much as I can do. Sorry, folks.
Okay, I found it on IMDb. So guess how many movies they starred together in?
I want to say it was something like 6 or 8.
Close. It was 8, because one of them was a short film.
Oh, okay.
So that wouldn't count.
Awesome. I win nothing for knowing that.
Well, are there any... I don't know if we should do this before we talk about the movies or after, but
sure.
If you want to discuss some of the other pairings that we've seen.
Sure, that's fine. We could, bring it up organically before the Black Cat, or, just now. Really doesn't matter. Podcasts seem to tangent, so I'm cool with whatever approach.
It's a fluid format.
Exactly. So yeah,
it's funny because... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to mention, yeah, you were talking about those pairings.
I have the Bela Lugosi collection on DVD.
Okay.
Which has, I think Universal put out a Karloff collection too, but it's funny because there's 5 movies on there, and 4 of them are collaborations they did with Karloff.
It's pretty funny.
So it's funny. It's also kind of sad, though, because you can see how Bela Lugosi's career was going, where his roles kind of get smaller and smaller, and Karloff's get larger. But I've seen 3 of the 4 of those.
Which ones were those?
The Black Cat and the Raven, obviously, and then The Invisible Ray.
Oh, okay.
Which is... Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen The Invisible Ray. I've been meaning to. It seems really cool. Just for the idea of Karloff and his slouch hat and coats touching people with his deadly, deadly radioactive touch.
Yeah, that one's cool. It's more of a sci-fi than a horror.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the origin story of like a supervillain in a 30s comic book.
Yeah, which is, definitely a drawing factor for me, I'd say.
And apart from that, I've also seen The Body Snatcher, which might be my favorite of the movies that they've done together. The
Body Snatcher is really good.
Robert Wise, one of the Val Lewton movies.
Yeah.
1945.
1945, that's right. As far as The Body Snatcher is concerned, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Well, it is just me, but I would consider that more... I would call that movie one of the Val Lewton movies before I would say it's one of the Karloff Lugosi movies. You know what I mean? Just because Lugosi's role is so diminutive, really. He just kind of has a throwaway role as some type of servant who tries to blackmail Karloff, and then pretty much I think that's the only scene in which they interact, and then 2 minutes later Karloff has strangled Lugosi and stows the body away somewhere. So, with me, I wouldn't compare, say, The Body Snatcher with The Black Cat. That's just me, though.
Yeah, you're right about that, but I do think that Lugosi was really good in that role.
Yeah?
And
it's been a while.
What's that?
It's been a while, so I guess it's why that seems somewhat surprising to me.
And I haven't seen Son of Frankenstein, but I've heard a lot of people say that that's one of Lugosi's best performances.
Wow, you haven't seen Son of Frankenstein? Have you seen Ghost of Frankenstein? Because he plays Igor in that too.
I have not. Maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. One of the two people say that he gives one of his best performances.
No, he really does. Yeah, as Igor in Son of Frankenstein from 1939, it is a really cool role, and it's really cool to watch for the fact that you're seeing Lugosi play basically it's completely. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a completely theatrical role, not in the same sense that Dracula was. When I say theatrical, I mean it's a really character role. He's playing a legitimate character. He's not playing the suave doctor or the suave vampire count or the mad doctor. The roles that he repeated, later in his career. Igor is kind of an anomaly, but it's a really good anomaly, and he just has so much fun with it. And I've actually heard, at least on one occasion, somebody bring up Igor, Bela Lugosi playing Igor, to basically support the argument. Maybe it was Greg Mank, the guy who wrote the Karloff Lugosi collaboration book. Who said that, one of the old myths, so to speak, as far as Karloff and Lugosi went, is that Lugosi didn't get any good parts, one, because of his accent, but because, he wasn't, I don't know how to say it, a risk taker, or he couldn't basically play, because he literally, literally couldn't play any other type of role. But he says, you look at Igor from Son of Frankenstein, and it's proof enough that he definitely had the potential to play characters like this. It was just a matter of him not getting those opportunities. So I suggest you definitely check out Son of Frankenstein. Ghost of Frankenstein, sure, just because he's in it, but definitely check out Son of Frankenstein. That might be another double feature episode in the future, folks.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, but definitely check it out.
I guess the next question would be, do you have a preference between the two?
That was bound to come up sometime, wasn't it?
Get out of the way now.
Yeah, right. Might as well squash that. You know what? I feel slightly bad having the opinion that I do, but I guess I shouldn't, because in the end, it all just comes down to preference. And if I'm being 100% honest with myself, if I really had to choose, I would probably choose Karloff. If for the sole reason that with him, which is something that is said many, many times about him, so forgive me if I'm just rehashing old stuff, he just invests himself in the roles so much professionally. It was always said about him, he was such a professional no matter what he was in. Despite, except maybe a few, maybe not so good roles, but very few in comparison to the amount that he did play. He always had this workmanlike effort, and he always just seemed to invest himself so much in the character. And honestly, I just like his brand of Sinister more than I like Lugosi's brand of Sinister, which, you can chalk it to, no pun intended, maybe being lost in translation a little bit because of Lugosi's accent and maybe some of his cultural awkwardisms, or whatever you want to call it. But I feel like which
worked well for Dracula, I think, because
he's the outsider
vampire who's been out of touch from society for hundreds of years. So his eccentricities are part of the character, I think.
Right, exactly. He's that outcast from the old world, and I guess a little bit of that might have carried over in later on in his career past Dracula, which is maybe why some people, and not to say that I don't like him at all, I want to make that very clear. I love Lugosi, but yeah, if it comes yeah, but if it comes down to whom I prefer, Karloff is definitely the one. I enjoy watching his villains and his brand of Sinister, like I said, more so than Lugosi. So now that I'm out of the hot seat, what is your position on that subject?
Well, I wish I could argue with you just because it would make the more interesting dynamic. But I have to say, I prefer Karloff as well.
Yeah.
I think when you watch Frankenstein and you see him giving this performance entirely with his face and his body language, with no dialogue, obviously Lugosi was up for that role earlier.
Yeah.
And passed on it because there weren't any words. And I mean, I don't think he could have pulled it off. He was more of a theatrical, to bring up that word again, actor. He played to the back row, really. He was great at chewing up the scenery. He was a great kind of supervillain.
Right.
But subtlety was not his strong suit. And I think Karloff just had a lot more range. He was a lot more... he could be sympathetic. He could be menacing.
Right.
Sometimes both at once, like as the monster. And he's more just compelling to watch, I think.
That's a great way to phrase it, I think. And it's funny because in regards to the two films that, we'll be talking about here shortly, I think you really do see exactly what you pointed out just now and your distinction between their two acting methods, so to speak. Because in one film, Karloff is the main villain in The Black Cat, and in The Raven, Lugosi is the villain. So you, especially watching them back to back like we did, you really get to see how each one handles it, so to speak. Suffice it to say, in The Raven, just to correlate it with what you said about chewing up the scenery, I don't think if Karloff had gotten the role of Richard Vallon, that you would see him laugh quite as maniacally as Lugosi does at the end of The Raven when he tosses, the lovers into the condensing room. He just...
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw The Raven, I was like, that is either the best or the worst maniacal laugh I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's something to behold, that is for sure. But, we'll, of course, get a little more into that as the episode goes along. But that is probably, if you're going to put the two actors in a snow globe and be able to observe, their nuances from that perspective, that moment from The Raven is the perfect moment to crystallize in regards to Lugosi playing villains as far as that goes. And I want to say just one thing really quick in regards to the Frankenstein thing that you mentioned. I find it, I don't know, I just thought of this for some reason, but, the story is, of course, that Lugosi passed up on the role because there weren't any lines. But I find it kind of funny, and I wonder if anybody's ever done this before. If you compare the number of lines that Dracula speaks in the 1931 movie compared to any of the characters, because there are lots of chunks of that movie where he's just silent, whether he's standing outside of Renfield's cell or when he's on the boat, and really when he's not interacting with Van Helsing or what have you, which is a lot of the time, or when he's just not on screen. It's kind of funny to think that, I realize that there's a difference between, say, 100 lines and no lines at all, but I just thought it was kind of funny that Lugosi would pass up on the role because, well, I don't have any lines. Well, there weren't too many that you had in Dracula either. But then again, Lugosi being Lugosi, he probably wanted something to work on, to chew down the scenery a little bit.
Yeah, I've also read that he wanted to design his own makeup for the Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, that's right.
And it wasn't up to par as far as the filmmakers felt.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny, I don't know if I heard the quote from Edward Van Sloan, who played Professor Waldman and Frankenstein, but I don't know if it was his reaction to Lugosi's test run with his own makeup, but there's a quote of him that says that when Lugosi was made up, whether it was his own design or Jack Pierce's or whoever's, that Lugosi basically looked like some kind of misfit from Babes in Toyland, with the big wig, and he basically looked like this big clay doll, I guess is what he was trying to communicate. So yeah, if that was a reaction to Lugosi's own designs, makeup-wise, then yeah, that's probably all the indication you need of maybe how successful that would have come out.
Yeah, that sounds like an apt description because from what I've read, his makeup was similar to the Golem, the silent film.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, they
So describing it as a big clay doll makes me think it was probably his design.
Yeah, probably was most likely. But at any rate, getting into the Black Cat first and foremost.
We love Lugosi.
We love you.
I feel a little uncomfortable that we've kind of just been crapping on him.
I know, right? We'll just have to, sporadically throughout the episode, we'll just have to shout that out, just so that his spirit doesn't come back to haunt us.
Yeah, he was great in certain roles, and he was a great theatrical actor.
Yeah, and you know what? Speaking of the Black Cat, I think this is one of his best roles too. And in addition to Dracula and Igor, I think Vitus Werdegast is definitely one of his best, if only for the dynamic that his character is operating from, which I think Lugosi handled really well. But before we get in, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say it is odd to see him playing the sympathetic character.
Exactly, which I think is really cool. And just for any of you out there who may be a little iffy, so to speak, as far as what the plot details for the movie are, basically it has a very simple premise of sorts. As we said, Bela Lugosi plays Dr. Vitus Werdegast, who is this distinguished European doctor who has spent the last 15 years in a prison camp, and he's on his way to the house of, okay, here we go, folks, Heimer Polzig? It's weird, because David Manners and his wife say, like, Perlzig, so I'm guessing it's Perlzig. Heimer Perlzig. What do you think?
Sure.
Works for you, yeah. Heimer Perlzig, who played by Karloff, he is on his way to Perlzig's house, and he meets up with David Manners and forget the actress's name, who play the newlywed couple who are on their honeymoon, and just kind of through chance. What's that?
Is it Helen Chambers? I'm gonna look it up.
I don't know. You'll have to.
I think that's wrong, but I have that name in my head for some reason.
Helen Chambers, I'm not sure. I know Helen Chandler played Lucy, I think, or was it Mina? Or oh god, didn't they switch the names in Dracula too? I'm confused.
I've gotten us into a morass.
I know. There was a woman named Helen Chandler in Dracula. That much I know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Julie Bishop is her name.
Wow, you were right on the money.
Peter and Joan are they?
Peter and Joan Allison. Which, God Almighty, David Manners, he is interesting, but we'll get into him later. But at any rate, Lugosi meets up with the newlyweds, and by chance and coincidence, they are on the road to Perlzig's house, and the Allisons are on board as well. The bus is derailed off the road during a storm, and the trio are forced to find shelter in Perlzig's house.
Bless the bus driver.
Yes, bless that poor mustachioed bus driver. He had such tales to tell. So short-lived. He'll be in our hearts. He'll be in our hearts just like that the innkeeper from Dracula, because he had a great mustache too.
Right.
Yeah. Should have been the same guy, I think.
Yes.
But, so last the poor bus driver. So they find shelter in Perlzig's house. Werdegast is there. What's that?
According to IMDb, by the way, the bus driver was based on, what's his name? The guy who directed Nosferatu.
Oh, F.W. Murnau?
That's right.
The bus driver was based on F.W. Murnau?
Oh, wait, no, it's incorrect. The ill-fated bus driver is a direct homage to The Doorman of the Last, which is a movie that Murnau directed.
Oh, okay. All right. I was going to say, huh?
And Karloff is based on Fritz Lang.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got you.
All right.
But,
sorry, interrupting your summary, by the way.
No, it's fine. But at any rate, Werdegas is there for very different purposes than just a housewarming party. Turns out that Pearlzig and Werdegas were both soldiers on the same side in this said war that Werdegas became a prisoner of on the enemy's side. And Pearlzig basically turned in the entire regiment of soldiers to save his own hide. That's why Werdegas ended up in prison, and he is now here to basically rip Pearlzig a new one because he suspects that Pearlzig may be holding up with his wife and daughter, which we find out is a very different type of situation than we might have initially thought. But therein lies some of the movie's very darkly alluring intricacies, I think. But suffice it to say, we're now in the thick of a very heated revenge plot, and the Allisons find themselves in the middle of these two slightly nefarious characters. So yeah, that is basically the setup there that we're looking at.
I like how you said the plot is simple, and then you spent 10 minutes explaining it.
Yeah, I know. You like how I did that. It's just to comfort people thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be really easy, and then the next thing they know, they have fallen into my long-winded hands. Can hands be long-winded? I don't know, but that's what they've fallen into.
Yours can be.
Yes, they can be. Any part of my anatomy could probably very much be long-winded.
That's for a different podcast.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Black Cat.
Sure, why not? Sounds like a good idea. All right.
I thought you might have something to say about it.
What? I just spent 15 minutes talking about the plot. What else is there to say about it?
You're right. But it is interesting in this movie, but the relationship between Karloff and Lugosi, the standoff is basically the entire movie.
Which is freaking awesome, in my unbiased opinion.
Yes, that is what the entire movie is built around, is getting these two legends, even at the time of horror, and just having them face off for an hour.
Yeah. Which
build the movie around that.
No, and it pretty much does work on that, basic concept of, hey, what if we got these two horror meisters, which is, I'm sure, is probably the vocabulary that they would have used in the 30s. What if we got these two horror meisters together in a movie to kind of face off against each other, which, hey, that's fine by me, because a pretty cool movie resulted from it. But it's definitely more than just pure horror fan wet dream fodder. I think it's not just
Freddy versus Jason.
That is a great example. Yes, and kind of clues you into some of our views on slashers, but that is for another podcast as well. But yeah, it is awesome just to see the clash of the titans, so to speak. These two, as you said, at the time even, legends of the genre just meet cinematically in the same movie. And I think that the characters that they play, like I alluded to a little bit earlier in regards to Lugosi, I think both of them, Lugosi and Karloff's characters, are perfectly portrayed, because like you mentioned before, it's interesting to see Lugosi play, it may not be exactly on the money to call him the hero, but he's the more sympathetic of the two, which is very interesting to see, because as we mentioned before, Karloff was definitely right, was definitely the one known for being having the more sympathetic roles, at least with Frankenstein and others. So to see Karloff play this arch alpha villain to Lugosi's sympathetic, wronged, tragic anti-hero is definitely something very, very interesting to take in.
And this was probably one of the first times that audiences were hearing Karloff's voice.
That's very true too.
Some films he'd done up to this point, Frankenstein and The Old Dark House.
Yeah, he was silent in that one too.
Yeah. So I wonder if there were any major films where he spoke before this.
That is very, it's interesting to consider. I hadn't even thought of that, honestly, which would have definitely lent an even more degree of awesome to the movie. It's like, Karloff speaks, which is probably something that you would have seen on the posters, I imagine. But yeah, that's kind of funny.
Uncanny Karloff.
Yeah, Karloff the Uncanny. And I love, too, how he is billed simply as Karloff, whereas, Lugosi is, of course, just billed as Bela Lugosi. It's not Boris Karloff, it's just Karloff.
Just Karloff.
Oh, no, wait. Oh, God, how can we have forgotten this? This was a terrible oversight. The Mummy.
Oh.
Yeah, see, I totally forgot.
There goes that theory.
Yeah, the minute you said Karloff the Uncanny, I think he was in the credits as Karloff the Uncanny. Maybe it was just Karloff. But I just remembered that. Yeah, The Mummy.
Yeah, who's seen The Mummy?
Yeah, who cares about it? I prefer the one from, 99, directed by Stephen Sommers. Just kidding.
You say that facetiously, but I actually do.
You know what? In some small ways, I do too. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. I admit it, folks. Sorry. I saw that very impressionable time in my youth, and that is my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I think we brought this up already on the comfort food episode, though.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mentioned it in a little thing I did for Kinder Trauma as well, that The Mummy was a definite guilty pleasure of mine. But at any rate, yeah, he spoke in The Mummy, so, which is funny because, I think they would have hyped that more up, the fact that Karloff was speaking for the first time.
Well, anyway.
So much for that.
Let's abandon that thought.
Yeah, but, as far as Karloff is concerned, and I know a lot of the things that I'm going to say in regards to most aspects of this movie are going to seem very, very fanish. So I apologize if they don't sound critical or analytical or anything smart sounding, and they're just unbridled geeky love. But first of all, I love a good villain. It's one of the things I look forward to most when watching movies, especially of this nature, because I wouldn't say there are a dime a dozen, but there's a good chance that, you can find a decent amount of them in horror films. I love good villains, and I love Karloff's portrayal of Perlzig. Right from the moment that we see him, it just, watching it just gets me amped up. And I haven't seen The Black Cat in some time until this recent rewatch. But just, seeing the intercom light up in his room, announcing Wordagast's arrival at the house, and you see Karloff rise from the bed, almost as if he were the mummy or something like that. He just rises so stiffly, like he's some
like the what do you call that when it's like hanging down from the bed, the posters of the bed?
It's not gossamer, is it?
I don't know.
Yeah,
sure,
whatever. That stuff. You see his silhouette in the bed curtains. And that, he just rises up from the bed, and there's what we don't know at the time is Wordagast's daughter in the bed next to him, looking very Snow White-esque in this kind of deathly slumber. And we just see him rise up from the bed, and he's just a shadow, and you hear his voice come out of the darkness. Ugh. Perfect. One of the, coolest introductions to the character, and it, just sets you up for the type of nefarious fellow that he is, because the music amps up, and, like I just detailed in minute description, he rises up, and then he welcomes his house guests in his lovely bathroom robe there. Satanic bathroom robe.
Yes. And it is funny, speaking of his Satanism, there's a book, I forget what the title of it is, but he's lying in bed, like a normal person would be reading like a Stephen King novel or something. He's reading like The Rites of Satan or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Light bedtime reading.
Yeah. No, that's right. that occurred to me when I was watching the movie too. That he was just propped up there on his comfy pillows and had his little reading light next to him. And no, it's not Nora Roberts or 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. It's the rites of Satanism.
Yeah.
What to do for that big event that you're planning.
Just to relax you before sleep.
Exactly. And, just to let you know all the ins and outs of sacrificing female souls, no sweat.
There's also a great shot later in the film of him, like, sitting out on his balcony.
I was hoping you'd mention that. I love that shot.
Yeah, with, like, dark clouds rolling in. And it really screams villain. That's a great piece of filmmaking by Edgar G. Ulmer, who directed this film.
Yes, it is. And, it really gets you to think that, it's kind of downplayed, the whole Satanism angle of the movie. Of course, it kind of comes out in the ritual scene, but, it's really not preceded by anything saying that, oh, this is a, satanic geared movie, in the sense that, Rosemary's Baby or, what have you might be, but just that little moment of, him out on the balcony as the clouds are rolling in and the wind is blowing, it's probably just me, but for the briefest moment, you almost kind of buy into his powers, his, supposed powers as the leader of this cult, because it was like, ooh, it was end of days type weather, the wind is restless and the trees are blowing, about crazily, it almost makes you think that this whole sacrificing of the soul isn't really, just for sadistic kicks and giggles. It might have kind of cosmic implications, but it's very brief. And it's not mentioned any more than that, and it's really only mentioned in my mind. I'm not sure if anybody else but me kind of got that feeling. What about you?
Yeah, it's definitely a very ominous shot. So it does seem like he's the master of the atmosphere at that point, almost.
Yeah,
through its dark allegiances.
Exactly. The whole world's spinning on his finger.
Right.
Yeah.
Which makes you wonder, how is dear old Lugosi going to take this guy down?
Exactly. Which, to be fair, it does take 2 people to take him down, but, who's counting?
Yeah. And also, Lugosi doesn't really seem to have much of a plan going in, almost.
No, it's kind of funny because he just grabs Joan from the altar and just kind of hightails it out of there. Doesn't ask, hey, where's Peter? Or, really, he just briefly says, oh, we got to get out of here. But, he just kind of on the fly, hey, servant, let's untie her. And
yeah, that whole rescue was predicated on the cult being distracted by a woman fainting.
Yeah, which is kind of random.
I didn't quite understand. Was that his daughter who fainted, Lugosi's daughter, or was it just a random cult member?
No.
I couldn't quite tell.
Yeah, I think it was a You know what? I'm not sure, because I was about to say no, it wasn't her, because Joan shows Lugosi, God, I forgot the daughter's name, but shows her on the
Karen?
Karen. Okay, yeah, Karen. Shows Joan shows Lugosi the daughter on the table later on, like just before him and Karloff start wrestling, and that's how he finds out that she's been there the whole time. And like I said, I was going to say no, that it wasn't her that fainted at the ceremony, but I guess maybe if she fainted and then one of the members put her on the table. But I think what was the audience was supposed to be led to believe, at least it's the impression I got when I watched it, is that Karloff killed her during that one moment where Joan was trying to inform Karen that her real father was there, Wurdigast, and then Karloff comes in stroking his, black pussycat, and then he brings Karen into the room and, she screams, it's like, no, father, no, and then she screams and Joan covers her ears. I thought that it was supposed to imply that Karloff had killed her, and thus it was her corpse that Joan led Werdegas to later in the movie, and
That
that.
would make sense, I suppose.
Well, yeah, it also made sense that it might have been her at the ceremony, but I think maybe Werdegas, well, no, he wouldn't have known what she looked like, I suppose, unless she bore a very striking resemblance to her mother. But yeah, I guess maybe even say if she was at the ceremony and he had seen her, he might not have realized it was her. So I guess it could be either, really.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense either way, really, but...
Nope. Good thing we figured that out, though.
Part of this cult would have a thicker skin about this type of thing.
Yeah, I know. They just kind of scatter all of a sudden, like, oh.
Nobody told her where they were going.
Yeah. There's this, oh my god, somebody broke out in a sweat. Time to leave.
But yeah, Lugosi tells her... he tells her that she's going to be sacrificed. He's like, don't worry, I'll come get you. It's like, well, what if that lady hadn't screamed? You wouldn't have had any plan at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Everything would have gone to shit. So then what, Doctor?
I think maybe, not to get into this too early, but that was part of my problem maybe with this movie was that relationship between them didn't seem as defined as I thought it could have been. And I think a big part of that was Lugosi doesn't really seem to have any kind of plan, so the power dynamic doesn't shift and struggle as much as I would maybe like it to in a movie that's basically about this metaphorical chess match between these two characters.
Right, I see what you mean. Are you saying between Lugosi and Karloff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I don't know. I'm not sure if I would agree with that completely, because I feel like their relationship was fairly well defined, at least enough that it suited my needs. Because, I don't want to say this. Well, no, I felt that the brief explanations that, Prozig had been a traitor and had pretty much persecuted Werdegas to his 15 years of imprisonment in hell, and had taken in Prozig had taken in with Werdegas' wife and daughter, and then I guess maybe if it didn't have the scene of them taking the short tour, so to speak, of the I don't know if you'd want to call them the catacombs, but the underground lair of the house. If the movie didn't have that scene or a scene like it, I might be more. I might agree that their whole rivalry and relationship wasn't really all that well defined. But I do kind of see what you're saying with, as far as the power struggle aspect of it's concerned, because for the most part, it seems like Karloff is the one in control all the time. There's no give and take. It's just, it's Karloff's show, and then in the end, Lugosi just barely manages to get the upper hand. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess I would have liked to see maybe more strategy from Lugosi, because Karloff is so in control. It's his house. Lugosi shows up saying, I'm going to kill you, so there's no element of surprise.
Yeah.
It just sort of feels like, I don't know why Karloff didn't just kill him right away, or I just had a hard time believing that the battle would go on for quite so long.
I see what you mean.
I don't know what Karloff was waiting for. Yeah. I mean, I liked the movie. I don't want to give the impression that I didn't like it. I liked it better on my second watch because I think I knew more what to expect. But yeah, I think I just did have a problem with maybe there wasn't quite as much acting and reacting. It was more just Lugosi kind of saying, I'm going to kill you. And Karloff's like, oh yeah? And then at the end, it's like, I'm going to slip in there thanks to these fortuitous circumstances that have worked out in my favor, my being Lugosi. And I don't know.
No, I do see where you're going with that, and yeah, I would agree with it to the extent that there's no, well, to basically compare it with the Raven, which hopefully we won't get into the Raven that much by doing so. I think with that movie, as far as this aspect is concerned, you get that a lot more because there are genuine reasons why Karloff's character in that movie is going along with Lugosi's plans and demands for such a long time.
Right.
There's motivation, there's reason why, they react to each other in the ways that they do. Whereas, I don't know, and I guess maybe that may be my attraction to the Black Cat, because I'll agree with you that, yeah, there are quite a few things that don't correspond at all with maybe how things would happen realistically or with a sense of logic involved. But I kind of like watching it just for the fact that, I guess maybe I view Wordagast and Pearl's Egg almost kind of more as archetypes than flesh and blood characters, like almost kind of comic book characters trying to sort out their dilemma and fairly melodramatic ways, as opposed to, having a sense of secrecy with, in Lugosi's case, how he's going to go about bringing about Karloff's demise and, maybe a little bit more of a power struggle that way. But I don't know. In the end, I still enjoy their relationship, and even though it may not be the most realistic of ones, I guess it's one that I can still enjoy on a good versus evil in the purest form dynamic.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy what you're selling.
You'll buy that? Yeah, and a bag of chips, I bet you will. One of the aspects of the Black Cat and, the Raven that I wanted to bring up at some point is depending on your definition and your perspective, the tenuous relation to Edgar Allan Poe that the two films would seem to have. I say seem to have because on closer examination, I think viewers may actually surprise themselves with how many related themes they can find, as opposed to thinking they're basically just using the Poe name, the Black Cat and, the Raven. They just happen to have those animals in them in a very kind of offhand way. But I think, like I said, if you watch the two movies closely and really listen to what the characters are saying, you'll find a closer relation to Poe than you might have initially thought. What do you think?
I would agree with that. It's a bit more shoehorned, a little more obviously into the Raven, which we'll get into. But in the Black Cat, there are definitely Poe-ish ideas.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of my favorite aspects of the movie, which is, you mentioned the catacombs earlier. What you did not mention was that there are several beautiful dead women in glass cases lit up like a butterfly collection.
And I knew that would be something that, as I was watching, I was like, oh yeah, Eric totally digs this. Because, yeah, not only is it being a great image, but, it just evokes such a mood, evokes that kind of, fairy tale Snow White type of, thought, these preserved beauties in glass and the love for the dead that, came up so much in Poe's work, specifically for Long Lost Women.
Yeah, and I think Poe said that the most poetical thing in the world is the death of a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
So here you have this case of preserved death of many beautiful women, and that does evoke Poe very strongly, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That's probably the aspect that I would think, even somebody who just has kind of a working knowledge of Poe would probably be able to pick right up, besides the literal Black Cat that's running around the house. But But yeah, I think that theme is the strongest one and the one that probably comes across the most as far as Poe-related aspects of the movie are concerned. One of the other ones that I thought was was pretty prevalent that I never thought of before was Pearlzig's house itself. Because when I looked at it, I thought to myself, it's probably no coincidence that it's kind of a strange looking house out on a lonely stretch of country. I thought that maybe we were getting a little bit of Usher influence in that. Do you?
Right.
What? You think so?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. It sounds fine with me.
There's also some elements of, I guess I wouldn't say incest, but the idea that Pearlzig married, so he says he married Lugosi's wife, and then she dies and he marries her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Poe was always kind of flirting with that kind of the edge of acceptability. Not that that's acceptable even by the edge, but that sort of, Roderick Usher's possible love for his sister.
Right.
Lust. So it does tread into that type of territory, I suppose.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't, I thought of the house, but I didn't think of that aspect of it at all. Which, yeah, I would buy that. I would buy what you're selling there.
Way to steal that phrase I just used.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm totally original in everything that I do. What are you talking about? Yeah. But in that sense, particularly when you watch this movie, you have that, as you mentioned, the slight incestual note of the story, the satanic elements, really
the gruesomeness of Karloff's eventual death.
God, you just took the words right out of my mouth. Took them out of my mouth.
And how was he killed?
Skinned alive.
He was flayed alive like an animal.
Have you ever seen an animal's skin? Yeah, it's kind of funny because I mentioned earlier that I hadn't really heard too much about the Black Cat before I watched it, but I did a little bit. My grandfather had seen the movie, and I learned a lot about the Universal horror films through him and my grandmother, and I believe that was the one thing about the Black Cat that I heard from him that I remembered. He told me that, look, he described it in his own lurid, funny way, that Lugosi skins Karloff alive. And of course, hearing that at, third grade age or whatever it was kind of incomprehensible to think of that, this movie made in 1934, like, I wondered how they went about it, and when I saw it the first time, I was like, oh, they so cheated out of that you don't see him skinned alive. But, that was one of the things that always stuck with me, the fact that one of the characters gets skinned alive, that's incredible. So, yeah, taking that into consideration, along with the incestual note and the satanic elements, even rewatching this movie, I couldn't help but, keep thinking, I can't believe they released this.
Yep, pre-production code.
Yeah, funny thing, isn't it?
Or Hays Code, I should say.
Yeah, pre-Hays Code, but it's crazy to consider that, something like this came out of the age of the Depression, and it's just kind of crazy to consider.
It is interesting to note how the satanic cult in this and the satanic cult in The Seventh Victim, which came out a decade later, they're so much more menacing in this movie. I think, anyway.
No, I would agree too. Well, it's funny saying that, because the satanic cult in this movie really has maybe, 5 minutes of screen time, and it's really just for the ritual scene.
Right.
The cult from The Seventh Victim, 20 minutes, would you say? a good solid 20 minutes, and the members of said cult do speak, but if you were to compare the two, kind of like you're alluding to, it's almost kind of like they're neutered, where I don't even, I only saw the seventh victim once, and it was a little while ago, so I don't even remember. Do any of them refer to themselves as Satanists, or is the term even used in relation to them? Does anybody use it to describe them or anything like that?
It is made explicit. I don't remember exactly what term they use, though.
Yeah, because just thinking about it, for some reason I'm remembering it as them kind of being pussies about it. And, like literally, they were kind of pussyfooting around just the whole idea of, whoa, we don't even get to see them in robes or anything. They're in their casual dress, sipping tea.
Yeah, I
And
think what I said at the time that I first saw it was, it's basically like a Tupperware party got together and then decided to worship Satan.
which is, accurate and amusing way to describe it.
Yeah, they have a policy of non-violence. They're a satanic
Exactly. Which
policy of non-violence. I'm not a huge fan of the seventh victim.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because you hear, I say that way too much, but the seventh victim is usually one that, I don't know, at least I know, I want to say I've heard a good amount of reviews or critiques that said, oh, it's one of the best of the Val Lewton films, which
Yeah, there's some film critic who, I don't remember who it is, but there's a film critic who notoriously hates horror movies. And he put The Seventh Victim on some list of like the greatest movies ever made or something. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about The Black Cat before we move on to The Raven?
As far as the Black Cat, I think we hit on just about everything else. I would like to say that David Manners continues to be hilarious. And the fact that he is so sappy, and I've heard and
Well, he does have this dialogue that he has to get through, though.
yeah, that's very true. And I have read some pretty funny accounts, like I think David J. Scull wrote in the Monster Show fairly extensively that David Manners, like later in his career, like he never even saw Dracula, he never watched it, and he knew the movies that he was in were, pretty much crap, to paraphrase. So I guess it comes across in his performance. But before we move on, I would like to say that if you want a good giggle, keep your eyes out for the one moment. I'm probably blowing it out of proportion, but it's subtle, and I'm surprised I never laughed at it hysterically before. It's the moment, I don't remember what it is specifically, but Perlzig and Werdegas are conversing in the living room. It's the moment where Joan comes out of her slight daze that she suffered from the accident, and she comes out and she seems almost kind of hypnotized, where she's talking to Perlzig and Werdegas. And at some moment, I think she faints, and David Manners comes into the room, and it's almost kind of like he interrupts Perlzig's and Werdegas's conversation. So with the straightest of faces and still looking at Werdegas and Perlzig, he just picks Joan up into his arms, almost as if he was putting on his hat. And he kind of gives this look like, good day, and he just leaves the room.
That's funny. I didn't make a note of that at the time.
Yeah, it was really awkward. I don't know, I guess because I'm not, these days, I guess men don't regularly pick up their women upon leaving the room. I guess maybe that's why it seemed kind of jarring to me, but
yeah, that's just what women did back then.
Yeah, they are always fainting all over the place, unless you were Fay Wray or some other woman who played a snappy reporter.
That wasn't Fay Wray. That was some other chick.
Some other chick from like a Mystery of the Wax Museum.
Yeah, Fay Wray was in that, but she was still the wide-eyed damsel in distress.
Well, so much for what I know, man.
I get what you're saying, though.
All right. Well, that's all that matters. You're the only thing that matters in my life.
Well, thank you.
So on that,
let's this and talk about our next film in the double feature.
Yes, which is The Raven.
My preferred of the two.
Yes, this is Eric's preferred of the two. In case you guys hadn't got that before, The Black Cat is my movie, so to speak. and the Raven is certainly Eric's.
You're Edmund Bateman.
Who told you?
Your picture in the papers. That's no disguise.
That's why I'm here. He said you could do... What was it he called it? I want you should change my face.
But I'm not a plastic surgeon, Bateman.
He said you could do it.
That is not necessary, Bateman. Put it away. I can do it. I can change your face.
Then do it.
It isn't plastic surgery, but there is a way.
Anyway, it's all right with me.
First, you must do something for me.
Like what?
It's in your line.
Like what?
Torture and murder.
That's not my line. My line is...
You shot your way out of San Quentin. 2 guards are dead. In a bank in Arizona, a man's face was mutilated, burned. Cashier of the bank.
Well, he tried to get me into trouble. I told him to keep his mouth shut. He gets the gag out of his mouth and starts yelling for the police. I had the acetylene torch in my hand.
So you put the burning torch into his face. Into his eyes.
No, sometimes you can't help things like that.
This job I want done is in your line, Bateman. Accept my word for it. I want you to do this for me. Then I change your face.
I got money. I'll pay for it.
No money.
I don't want to get into no more trouble. And they're after me now.
I can take care of that. You can stay here after the job is done.
I'll tell you something, Doc. Ever since I was born, everybody looks at me and says, you're ugly. Makes me feel mean.
Why are you telling me this? I'm not interested in your life story.
I'm saying, Doc, maybe because I look ugly. Maybe if a man looks ugly, he does ugly things.
You are saying something profound. A man with a face so hideously ugly.
Don't ask me to do this job for you, Doc. I don't want to do them things no more. Fix me so I look good, will you? Then maybe I can...
All right, Bateman.
You'll do it, Doc. You'll change me.
Yes.
When?
Now.
I was pretty surprised. This was some years ago, about 2 or 3, on Eric's old blog, where he totally stole my idea. Where on Halloween, the days leading up to Halloween, I posted like my top 20 favorite horror films, and then on Halloween and the day following, Eric posted his top 20 favorite horror films, and he noted that he totally stole the idea from me. It's documented, you can check it out.
Yes, I gave you credit.
Yes, you gave me credit, but you said that I couldn't keep my lunch money away from you, so you kind of bullied me.
Can't believe you remember that.
Yeah, pretty sad. I don't remember anything.
I did put the Raven on there in my top 20.
That's right, and it was the first time I had ever seen anybody put that movie in their top countdown of horror movies. So when we got around to the podcast and doing this double feature, I basically kind of wanted to find out just why Eric fancies the movies so. So why don't you let us know that? You know, did it start when you first watched it, or was it kind of a love that developed? Oh, okay, first watch then.
But I saw the Raven a couple years ago when I bought that heretofore mentioned Bela Lugosi Spotlight collection from Universal.
Yes.
I threw that one in after The Black Cat and watched it, and I really loved it. I think I love movies from the 30s and 40s, horror movies in particular, and this one is emblematic of all that I love about those movies. It's really fun to watch. It's very over the top. It's got some great set design and lighting. It's got a great villain, or possibly 2. It's got some great fun supporting characters. It's beautiful to look at. It's fun to watch.
Mm.
And it's just all around a silly, monster mashy kind of good time.
I would agree with all those statements that it does have those elements. One of the ones that you mentioned that I think obviously distinguishes it from the Black Cat in a pretty big way is the amusing supporting characters that you mentioned, which seems to be something that you tend to like. I think I've gathered from your love for 30s horror films, and I like them too. Like particularly in James Whale always had great supporting characters in his movies.
Yeah, there's a lot of kooks running around in these movies.
Exactly, they're always kooky or eccentric in some way. The ones that we've mentioned before, I think we might have mentioned in a podcast episode. I don't know. The kooky British characters from Werewolf of London are also some favorites, especially the two biddies renting out the inn.
Yeah, who smash each other over the head with bottles.
Oh God, you don't get more more kooky than that. They're basically Punch and Judy puppets.
Right. I just love that sort of old-timey feel. These characters who think they wandered in from the set of The Thin Man or something.
Exactly.
And I guess the only difference between these kooky characters and the monster is that the monster is self-aware.
Exactly. Like they know what's going on.
People think that they're totally normal.
Yeah, when they're completely oblivious to what's going on around them.
Yeah, it's funny in this movie. I guess I should give a plot synopsis before I get too deep into it.
Sure, give us a whirl.
I'm not going to bother with names like you did because I don't think it really matters.
You know what?
Lugosi is a world-famous doctor. He's retired. He's a brilliant surgeon. And a woman is driving along a high cliff road like they do in these movies. And then there's this construction or something, and she panics, falls off the cliff, and she's about to die. And she turns out to be the daughter of a very prominent judge who tries to contact Bela Lugosi to get him to save her life. And he eventually gives in, saves her life, and then falls in love with her. But of course, she is betrothed to another man. So this starts off a spiral of loathing and madness in our Poe-worshipping protagonist. And he devises a torture chamber, essentially. Well, actually, I guess that's how you know he's already off his rocker to begin with, is he already has this torture chamber built from his love of Poe. So he has the walls that come together to smash the people in the room. He's got the pendulum. Is that all they utilize in this movie?
The walls, the
house
pendulum.
Of mirrors that he keeps
Boris
Karloff in. And so he basically decides he's going to murder everybody because he's mad. And the judge in particular is going to get the pendulum treatment. So the entire second half of the movie is him launching his plan into action. And then Karloff comes into the picture as I don't even know how to describe him because he's a psychopath, but he's not a malicious psychopath, if that makes any sense.
He's a psychopath out of necessity.
And he's almost kind of a Lenny character from Of Mice and Men because he doesn't seem like he wants to hurt people, but he's got sort of a complex about the way he looks. So he escapes from prison after a bank robbery where he takes a torch to a man's face because the man was trying to scream for help. And he shows up at Lugosi's door because he's aware of Lugosi's reputation as a plastic surgeon. He wants him to give him a new face so he can be reassimilated into society as a good-looking individual because his anger, he believes, stems from the fact that he's been told from the very beginning that he's ugly. And Lugosi says, yeah, sure, I'll help you. And then he, of course, deforms him even more and holds him on this string saying, I'll give you a beautiful face if you do what I want. So he's basically trying to make him into his servant, basically, by dangling this favor over his head. And then the movie plays out from there.
Yeah, that was a pretty simple plot description, too.
Shut up.
But yes, that is exactly how the movie pans out. It's pretty much a fun ride, as Eric said, from beginning to end. We are with Lugosi pretty much throughout the whole picture. We are with him throughout the whole picture. So he does take on more of a protagonist role, whereas in The Black Cat, it was more about the adversity that had been built up between these two characters. So in The Raven, we kind of are in the sympathetic front seat riding shotgun with Lugosi and his character. And I think, too, we talked about in The Black Cat how Lugosi plays the more sympathetic role of the two, even though Werdegas is kind of driven in his, thirst for vengeance. He's the more sympathetic of the two. But in The Raven, I think you could definitely make the argument that both Karloff and Lugosi are sympathetic and kind of tragic. I mean, Lugosi goes off on a mad tangent, but still, he is kind of operating from, spurned feelings. There we go.
Yeah, and that's kind of how they weave Poe into this story. Is Lugosi talks. There's a scene where they're asking him about his interpretation of the poem "The Raven."
Yeah.
And it's basically his explanation is a very thinly veiled summary of what happened to him, which was he was in love with this beautiful woman. He couldn't be with her. He was brilliant, but brilliance turns to madness because of his inability to be with the one he loves, and he gets murderous.
Exactly, which, again, alluding to what I said earlier, I think if you really, specifically with this movie, if you look into the dialogue that Lugosi really says for the most part, it's not just, gobbledygook. His dialogue really does carry some of the themes and pathos, I guess maybe you could say, that was in Poe's work. Especially, I loved in the end where it sounds more like a mad rant, but, I thought, this really does sound like Poe when Lugosi was convinced that once he has killed his love and her betrothed, that he will be rid of this torture that is with him forever. Once he has killed them, then he will be free of it, which kind of, harkens back to the Telltale Heart and other guilt-ridden, torture-driven stories that Poe penned. So yeah, that in particular for me, that was the Poe moment, so to speak, at least in theme.
The Poement.
Yeah, the Poement.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. Because, as you say, Edgar Allan Poe's characters were often driven by this internal psychological self-torment, and that motivates their perversity, as it were.
Yes, very much so. As far as superficially, though, clearly the greatest moment in this movie is that delicious, gothically delicious dance sequence that,
right.
Yes, Lugosi goes to the judge's daughter. She's a dancer, and of course, the recital she would happen to be in is a interpretive dance recital of Poe's The Raven. And basically the stage is set up where, there's Poe in the corner penning the poem and narrating it. And kind of the scenery is you have the tall windows that shows the bare trees in the background and the large doorway with the mounted raven with its wings spread. And then there's, I really wish I knew the character's name, but there's the daughter dancing, and she has this wonderful masquerade type domino mask on, and just her fluid movements. Man, if you get gothic hard-ons, this is definitely the cream of the crop here.
Yeah, it's pretty avant-garde, I guess I would say.
Yeah, and I kind of had a similar moment watching that as I did the Catacombs tour from the Black Cat. I had a moment where I said, "Yeah, this is probably something that Eric really enjoys about this movie too."
Yeah, that's one of the things that I just love about old horror movies is there is that kind of even in their sort of B-movie-ness, they are willing to embrace this kind of avant-garde sophistication at times, and just sort of throw out all this sort of weird, like this. You could completely eliminate this moment from the movie, and it wouldn't affect the story at all.
Yeah,
but it's just there for atmosphere and to sort of get some interesting gothic imagery into the mix.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it could have totally been excised from the film, but we have the benefit of seeing, so, and I think it works well for the story, even though we say it can be excised, because
I guess it has something to do with the thematic portion of the film.
Yeah, because you can really, it's almost as if you're seeing what Lugosi's character is seeing when he, is thinking about Poe. This is kind of his view of basically the intricacies of his writing. I'm not sure how to explain it really, but that's the idea that that I'm going with here. All right, cool. Making sense to one person, that's a start.
And our one listener also.
Yes, thank you, one listener. Appreciate your stay.
Her name is Jean, by the way.
Oh, wonderful. Nice to meet you, Jean.
No, the character's name is Jean.
Oh.
That might also be our male or female listener.
Well, there we are then. Well, it's nice to meet Jean and Jean. I like how both of the villains in The Black Cat and the Raven both know how to play toccata and fugue D minor.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, it's because I made a note of it when Karloff was playing it in The Black Cat. I made, some silly little notation like, villain playing toccata and fugue D minor. That's like 500 awesome points. And then when I saw Lugosi do it, I'm like, hey, he must have been teaching lessons to Lugosi's character. And it's
the first thing you learn in villain school, I think.
Exactly. That's Music 101. They teach you how to... It's like chopsticks for villains.
I think what they do is that's how you get into the school is they ask you to perform a piece, and if you don't choose toccata, they're like, you're not really cut out for this.
Yeah, you might want to consider accounting.
Anyway, what else did I have to say about The Raven?
Well, do we want to talk about Karloff? We spent a little time on Lugosi. Like maybe his role in the film.
But yeah, like I said, he's kind of a Lenny-type character. He's got the job of making this guy sympathetic, even though he burned a guy's face with a torch.
Yeah. Kind of hard, but, can be done.
But his job with this performance is to make you believe that this guy could go through this character arc where he does want to eventually do the right thing, even at the expense of, or the loss of, what his goal has always been, which is to become a good-looking person. He has to say so long to that dream, and in order to save Jean and her David Manners-esque role.
Yeah, her boorish husband, or soon-to-be boorish husband.
Right.
But, like I said before, that is something that I think distinguishes the two Lugosi and Karloff characters from this movie to the ones in The Black Cat. Because, like I said before, the ones from The Black Cat are almost archetypes. Almost. Just because they operate on good and evil terms. There's really too many humanistic qualities about them. But in the in the Raven, there's more motivation and there's more purpose for what they do. There's an actual arc that Karloff's character goes through anyway. And as we said before, where Lugosi is kind of sympathetic in this movie because he's operating, his villainy is at least in part based on his spurned feelings. And, it is kind of shitty the way the whole thing is handled, where, the judge comes to Lugosi and says, hey, we can't have, my daughter getting a crush on you. She's to be married. And, he, of course, gets a little offended by it. With Bateman, I think this is just another thing that I made a note of. His character is interesting because as opposed to saving the day, as Werdegas did in The Black Cat, solely out of vengeance, because really that's, the whole purpose of what he did through the movie and his punishment for Karloff.
Right.
And the Raven, Karloff makes a sacrifice. Bateman makes a sacrifice to save the romantic couple. In The Black Cat, silly, funny enough, Lugosi dies. Besides from making the whole house explode, he's injured in part because David Manners thought that he wasn't on their side, so literally shot him in the back. Again, attributing to David Manners' general hilariousness. But as opposed to kind of being this on the fringe, do we trust him? Is he really crazy character who's doing things solely out of this self-perpetuated need for vengeance, as Werdegas did in The Black Cat? Bateman says, you know what? She was nice to me. She didn't, turn away from me. After initially being frightened of me, she, offered a kind hand. She told me she could help. And that's why he, along with just thinking that Lugosi's crazy, that's why he makes the final sacrifice to save the newlyweds over Lugosi, which I think is interesting as a character.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why Karloff was in this role rather than Lugosi.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if Lugosi could necessarily pull off that sort of pathos.
Exactly, which goes back to what we were saying about the two earlier, just that Karloff, was more versatile, and the very role that got him, on his start was a very sympathetic role as the Frankenstein monster, and pathos was basically his game, so to speak. I mean, even as the Mummy, you still felt a little sorry for him because he was operating out of love, and he was mummified for trying to reunite himself with his long lost love. So, almost in every character that Karloff played was that sense of he's doing it for a reason. He's not completely evil. He may do evil things, like putting a torch in a guy's face, but he's not completely evil. Besides maybe, of course, Gray from The Body Snatcher, which is probably why people tend to like that role so much, just because he's so completely wicked.
Yeah. And even in another great villain role he had with pathos was Bedlam.
Yeah, which
he goes through this whole movie being a total arsehole, but then at the end, the inmates take sympathy on him and allow him to have a trial to whether he should save his own life, and he comes out talking about how he has this fear in him and all this stuff that suddenly casts this sadistic character in a completely different light. And Karloff was really the go-to guy if you wanted to be able to inure. Is that the right word? Is that even it word?
To endear.
To I can't think of the word. But basically to have shades of gray in his performance.
Right, exactly.
He was really a film actor, I think, before there really was film acting. He could convey so much just with his eyes.
Yeah.
His voice, and he had subtlety in an era where actors were trying to figure out what to do with this new medium and how broadly they should play it, how specifically they should play it, before there was, Stanislavski and Meisner and all these techniques that came along and sort of revolutionized it. I think Karloff really could have held his own in that camp because he really had that nuance.
I agree totally, and it's cool to hear it, because again, I didn't actually think of this beforehand. That Karloff was working in a fairly new medium, and he was around before the major acting methods kind of came into prominence. So the fact that he was making these what would appear to be objectively wholly evil characters endearing, at least in a little small part to the audience, really is a testament to just what a presence he had, just what a, like you said, just how easy he made it seem to be able to manipulate those different shades of his character with, a slight glint of those big expressive eyes of his, or, certain movement of his body. So, yeah. Lugosi rocks, by the way. We love Lugosi.
Yes, as we keep saying.
As we keep saying, but do we really?
Nobody else could have been Dracula.
Nobody. That's right. Not even Lon Chaney, who we also love. Don't hurt us. Don't haunt us. But, as far as...
I would like to see that alternate universe, though, where Lon Chaney did play Dracula.
I think we all would, at least a little bit, just to see what it would have looked like, if anything.
Yeah, because he didn't... I guess he could have done makeup, but he didn't really have that sort of exotic European appearance, really.
No, because, if I were to see that, I probably wouldn't be able to detach myself from the idea of him being because, the funny thing about Chaney is that, I don't know how else to say it, and it may come off as blunt, but, he was this average-looking guy, just like, he had this everyday kind of experienced-looking face.
Kind of a pork roast of a face.
Yeah, in a sense.
Very withered.
Yeah, exactly. But, the idea of him playing anything close to exotic without...
I guess he did play a gypsy a few times, right?
Yeah. Yeah, true
Maybe
enough.
He done it. I don't know. He was a genius.
Maybe we know nothing, which is a complete possibility.
Yep. I think that's probably the closest to the truth we'll ever get.
Exactly. So you heard it here first, folks, and that's the last time you're going to hear it. But as far as the Raven is concerned, I don't believe there's anything else needed to touch on. We already mentioned Lugosi's awesome maniacal laugh, so that doesn't need any more bringing up. But
that's be an internet meme, like when the Darth Vader no from Revenge of the Sith. No. We need to have a site that's just Lugosi laughing in a loop.
Exactly. That should be a hit YouTube video for sure. I'll look into it. I'll see what I can do. Well, I think with all that in mind, that pretty much ties a cute little bow on this double feature discussion of the Black Cat and the Raven. Touch on some interesting territory as far as Karloff and Lugosi are concerned. If maybe some of you listeners out there would like to sound off your comments, please by all means do so. Let us know maybe what you think of these movies, or what you think of other Karloff and Lugosi pairings, or just any old random thing. Let us know what you're thinking, because we want to dig into your brain meats like so many yummy, yummy parasites. Do you have anything to add to that?
Or earwigs.
Or earwigs. Very good, yes. I like earwigs. Kind of it's a nice Night Gallery reference. So.
Is it? It was inadvertent in that case.
Well then, congrats for making an inadvertent Rod Serling reference. You get a gold star. But yes, we want to know what you're thinking, and we're just we're just a pair of curious earwigs, which I guess could maybe be an Animorphs reference, because they had earwig type creatures in that show.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
That book series, you mean?
Yeah, that book series that...
Let's not bring up the television show.
Yeah, all the kids were... was all the rage.
Like 30, all the kids who were in their 30s on that show.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. We'll have to do a podcast episode on Animorphs.
Oh, man, that would be awesome.
He said jokingly, not realizing that Eric would actually be excited for it.
I used to love that series.
Oh, well, that makes...
It was sad to walk into the bookstore and then, gradually all of the top 5 slots, which used to be taken up by Animorphs, were being eaten up by Harry Potter books.
I felt
that was the end of K.A. Applegate's reign. Yeah,
I felt that very same transition with Goosebumps. Again, referring to the decline of those lovely scholastic titles. But we've already talked about, so why waste time? Did I mention that I've been sipping vodka this whole time? That would be a great excuse, but sadly I just talk this way out of my own need to... See, I can't even talk right now. Weird.
This has been the Sinister Spotlight Podcast. I'm Eric, and that's Jose. Do we have an email address or something that we should be plugging?
We don't, but if people would like, they could leave comments in the comments section of the Grim Reader posts that this Eric... This Eric
right here.
If any of you would like to leave comments, be sure to do it in the comments section, highly advised, on this post at the Grim Reader blog, or even leave us a comment on the YouTube channel, which these episodes are posted. Either way, we would love to hear your thoughts. So, for the very first double feature episode of the Sinister Spotlight on the Black Cat and the Raven, this is Jose signing off, and that's Eric signing off. See him over there?
Yo.
There he is, signing off.
Where my bitches at?
Exactly. This is the type of
sign-off phrase. I don't really know hip-hop lingo.
It's close enough. I'm satisfied with it.
Yep, and I'm excited. We got some more double feature ideas in the mix, which I'm very excited about.
Exactly. So keep your eyes and ears peeled.
Subscribe.
Exactly. Subscribe. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to us on Blogger. Those are the only two that you can subscribe to us on. It sounds like I'm going to list more, but I'm not, because there aren't. So just do it in those two venues.
Yeah, it seemed like there was going to be a pretty healthy list there.
I know.
And then it just kind of petered out.
Exactly. It's weird. Really weird.
Maybe someday we'll have a RSS feed or something.
Yeah, but, we're not popular enough, so for the moment, we'll just... Yeah, I know, it's sad. For the moment, we'll just try to quote rap lyrics and talk about horror films. That's what you're going to get with the Sinister Spotlight. Horribly misquoted rap lyrics and maybe something about horror movies. Maybe, if we feel like it. But...
what about urban horror movies? Leprechaun in the Hood.
Alright, yeah, Tales from the Hood.
Right.
Yeah, I see a podcast topic in the future.
Oh, man.
So...
That's going to be quite a watch list.
Oh, yeah. That's good. That'll definitely be a very interesting marathon of films.
What's that one that Snoop Dogg is in? Bones or something?
Yeah, Bones. And then there's Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror, I think.
Anything involving Snoop Dogg.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
And I think this probably has to be on record as being the most longest climax to a podcast episode.
It's kind of a tantric.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, people are listening and they're wondering, when is it going to end? I need to take my dog out, or I need to feed my children, But I'm sorry.
Yeah, I gotta go to sleep.
Yeah, we have needs too, people. So don't think we like doing this.
I know.
Yeah.
We are slaves to this format.
Exactly. We're nothing but tools to be used by the handyman that is the podcast god. Yeah.
Right.
All right, so for the Sinister Spotlight, this is Jose again signing off, and there's Eric signing off.
Bye.
All right, succinct. I like it. Let's leave now while we still have the chance.
Okay.
Goodbye.